Well, first of all, thank you for having me today, and it's great that I have an opportunity to talk to you, and I will keep my comments very short, and I would prefer that you ask questions and I would be more concrete, and we would be talking about what you are interested in, not what I'm interested in, although I guess that we have lots of interesting and shared concerns. First of all, usually when we have international gatherings, people ask me, okay, you came from that remote country, do you really have something to share with us but general concerns about democracy? Why would you tell us all those stories? We are so different culturally, although not that different politically, but in this regard, I would just like to make one introductory comment that it's obvious that all countries are different, okay? But when our colleagues from Serbian movement Otpor came to Ukraine in 2003 to help us train people and how we could bring down Yanukovych in 2004, most of my colleagues in the democratic movement, they were saying that, okay, you know, Serbia is very different country than Ukraine. It's much smaller, economy is different, and lots of other points. And these Serbian colleagues came to Ukraine, you know, after the Rose Revolution in Georgia. And when I was sharing my concerns with these Serbian friends, telling them that, you know, Ukrainian activists are quite skeptical about you training us on how to bring down Kuchma regime and how to stop Yanukovych previous time. And my Serbian colleagues were smiling, saying, you know, we have this story every time. Last time we were helping Georgians to bring down Shevardnadze, we got the same questions and the same skepticism in Tbilisi. So naturally we have all that in Kiev. And you know that later, the same year, we stopped Yanukovych when he tried to usurp power in 2004. There was an attempt to falsify elections, and I happened to be a coordinator of the biggest non-partisan campaign fighting for fair elections. And with support from our Serbian colleagues, and with support of US taxpayers, and of course with support from millions of Ukrainians, we managed to stop that attempt of Yanukovych to usurp power, and that was almost without violence. Nobody was killed in Kiev in 2004. And in this regard, I would say that this time, when we managed to oust Yanukovych, we were not that successful, because you know that there were more than 100 victims, more than 100 killed, and at least several thousands people beaten on the streets in Kiev. And of course it's some kind of degradation of Ukrainian capacity to resist. There are a number of reasons for that, and I would not go into details. Maybe if you will be interested, I can explain in the comments. But we had the same problem in common with 2004, and that's role of Russia. In 2003, previous to the attempt to falsify elections, Yanukovych got support from Putin. They had shared military parade in Kiev. And when Yanukovych managed to win more or less democratically, which is again a paradox, in 2010, and then he usurped power through changing constitution and increasing his powers, one of the first things he signed was agreement to extend presence of Russian Black Sea Fleet in the Ukrainian territory, the Crimea. So the extension agreement was for 20 years more. And now, when Yanukovych was ousted, unfortunately with some violence on the part of the protest movement too, Putin realized that actually he can get problems in Crimea with the military base in Sevastopol. And why it's so important? Why, I guess that one of the key reasons for the current military campaign against Ukraine by Russia and why the takeover of the whole Crimea was so important and is still so important for Putin, not just for Ukrainians, although in a different way, of course. The reason is that Russian regime is selling to at least some part of the voters, and unfortunately a very big share of Russian voters, the idea of neo-Soviet empire. And this is probably the only product that can be produced by this neo-Soviet regime. They can't provide Russians with good governance. They can't stop corruption. The only thing they can show to those living the times of Soviet Union is to present the picture that in some way this empire still exists. And what is the easiest way to persuade Russian voters that actually the regime in Kremlin is efficient in providing this neo-imperial state? It's to show every year that there is a joint military parade. And although from the Ukrainian side, these parades, they look like, parade of two friendly military forces, but from Russia, it definitely looks different. It looks like their Tsar is coming to some province, and those small Ukrainians are happy to have Russian ships next to Ukrainian ships, and they are welcoming presence of big Russia in small Ukraine. And actually, the only thing Russia can do to project that is now Crimea. So it's not just very cheap way to get that projection for Russians, but it's also the only way, because after the war in Georgia, it's very difficult for Putin to show that actually it's a big empire. Because from the Soviet time, Russians have very clear idea of what military victory is. And it is flags of the Nazi Germany on the Red Square. It's tribunal. It's head of the enemy burned down in his bunker in Germany. And nothing like that happened in 2008 within the war of Russia against small, actually teeny Georgia. Okay, so they failed to provide that picture of victory to the majority of Russians. And probably that was a reason that even rating of NATO increased among Russians after 2004. If you look at the results of the Pew Research Center, a respected US survey company, you would find out that level of trust among Russians towards the North Atlantic Treaty Organization increased about 10% after 2008. And my explanation of that strange thing was that first, Russians felt that something wrong was with the Russian army, which failed to take over the capital of Georgia, Tbilisi. And NATO did not react the way lots of Russians expected it to react with a military operation against Russia. Why it's important that after that campaign, the only place that Russia can project this idea of military strength was Crimea and Sevastopol and Russian base in Sevastopol and the territory of Ukraine. So when Yanukovych lost again and was ousted and left to Russia, and you know that now he is hiding in a Russian city, Putin realized that actually he can lose the main source of his power inside Russia. Okay, so that's why they try to act preemptively and take over the whole territory of Crimea, and now a Russian so-called parliament denounced the agreement on the basement of Russian fleet in Crimea, because now they consider Crimea to be Russian territory, so they don't have to pay for the base, which can play a funny trick with Russians in the next several years, but that's a separate issue. So to finish this, my short comments, I would claim that the only way to deal with the situation is internally. Okay, and like my colleagues mentioned it in the introductory statements, that it's up to us, it's up to Ukrainians to stop that intervention. We can do it as of today only in a non-military way. I'm sure that Ukrainians can recall their experience in fighting oppressors non-violently, and that they can reform country in a place which would be worthwhile for the people in Crimea and other parts of Ukraine to stay in. And the way for Ukraine to win this conflict is to make sure that we can not only stop Yanukovych, but we can also consolidate democracy, and we can make Ukraine into a strong economy, welcoming investments, protecting private property rights, and making sure that it's a nice place to stay in. And it can probably be a bad idea to join Russia instead. Thank you.